I knew the company was finished the moment Christopher Walsh walked through those glass doors. Not when our stock took a nosedive, and not when they replaced the decent coffee with some organic mess that tasted like disappointment. It was when this 29-year-old kid in a tailored vest strutted into our conference room like he owned the place. My name's Daniel Patterson, I'm 48, and I've been writing code since before this kid learned to drive. 8 years at TechFlow Systems in Phoenix, through the good times and the disasters. I'm the guy who keeps the lights on when everything goes sideways. Former Navy logistics specialist, transitioned to civilian tech after my 20-year service ended. The military taught me systems thinking, patience, and how to plan for scenarios other people can't imagine. But to Christopher, I was just another old-timer taking up space and salary. I was sitting in my usual corner spot, nursing lukewarm coffee, and watching our new CTO survey the room like a general inspecting troops he planned to court-martial. The conference room was packed with tired engineers, most of us pushing 40 or well past it. We'd survived the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial meltdown, COVID supply chain nightmares. We were battle-tested professionals. But Christopher saw dinosaurs blocking his vision of disruption. The guy had been at TechFlow exactly 3 weeks. Hired by the board after our previous CTO, a decent man named Stanley Rodriguez, took early retirement rather than deal with what he called the coming stupidity storm. Stanley had tried to warn us during his farewell lunch. They're bringing in someone young, someone who thinks experience is a liability instead of an asset. "All right, team," Christopher started, clapping his hands like we were kindergartners. "I've been reviewing our architecture, and honestly, it's a disaster. Legacy garbage from the Stone Age. We're pivoting to a cloud-native, AI-driven microservices ecosystem by Q4. He threw up a slide that looked like a football play drawn by someone having a seizure, circles and arrows that made zero sense to anyone who actually understood how systems work. But here's the kicker. He was proposing to gut the central core of our entire logistics platform. The legacy garbage he was talking about, that was Flowcore. That was my baby. I built Flowcore during the 2021 supply chain crisis, when the rest of the world was falling apart. While shipping giants were losing billions and smaller companies were going bankrupt, my system kept us alive. We processed $150 million in transactions that year because of that code. The algorithm optimized vendor routing across 47 states, handled customs documentation for international shipments, and integrated with legacy mainframes that other companies couldn't even connect to. During those nightmare months, I was pulling 16-hour days, living on coffee and determination. Navy training kicked in. You don't abandon ship when seas get rough, you fix what's broken and keep sailing. While competitors crashed, TechFlow became the logistics company everyone wanted to partner with. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through his presentation. Heads turned. I hadn't spoken in a meeting for months. "That garbage handles 85% of our vendor compliance. You delete that core and you're not pivoting, you're committing corporate suicide." Christopher turned to me with this practiced smile, the kind you learn at business school. He looked at my faded navy shirt, my graying beard, then checked his Apple Watch like my time was already up. "And you are?" He knew exactly who I was. I was the line item on the budget that nobody could explain but nobody dared cut. The developer who'd saved the company multiple times but never got invited to executive meetings. Daniel Patterson. I built the backbone you're trying to surgically remove. Christopher actually chuckled, this wet, condescending sound that made my jaw tighten. "Right, Daniel. Look, I appreciate what you did back in the day, but we're not running a museum here. We need agility. We need velocity. Your monolithic approach is holding us hostage to legacy thinking." Legacy thinking. There it was. Corporate speak for "you're old and in the way." I'd heard variations of this before. Dinosaur, old school, stuck in the past. The tech industry's polite way of saying your 20 years of experience meant nothing compared to fresh blood and buzzwords. The thing is, back in 2016, when TechFlow was just a chaotic startup with more lawsuits than revenue, they couldn't afford me. I was an independent contractor with rates that made CFOs weep. Fresh out of the Navy with specialized logistics experience, I was in demand. So my lawyer, Anthony Rodriguez, sharp guy who operates out of a strip mall but knows contracts like a submarine commander knows sonar, came up with a different deal. I didn't sign an employment contract. I signed a licensing agreement, I incorporated my own LLC, Patterson Tech Solutions, and licensed the Flowcore platform to them. Think Microsoft or Adobe. You don't buy the software, you buy the right to use it. And like any landlord with rowdy tenants, I kept the master key. Christopher had no idea. He saw a 48-year-old guy in a worn-out shirt and assumed I was some diversity hire from a bygone era, kept around for appearances. He thought he was firing dead weight. He didn't realize he was trying to evict the landlord while still living in the house. The military had taught me something valuable. Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Okay, Christopher, I said, leaning back in my chair. You're the boss. Agility and velocity. Got it. He smirked and turned back to his meaningless diagram. We'll start sunsetting the old modules immediately. HR will handle some restructuring to align with our new vision. Restructuring. Corporate talk for firing people who actually know how things work. I didn't argue. Didn't throw anything, though the urge was strong. Just sat there, watching him talk about synergies and bandwidth while I checked the date on my phone. My licensing contract renewed automatically every quarter unless contested. Next payment was due in 3 days. Section 4 of my contract was crystal clear about what happens when the licensee tries to modify, reverse engineer, or disparage the software without authorization. And Section 6? That was the nuclear option. Christopher wrapped up his meeting with a "let's crush it" team and stormed out, probably to go drink a kale smoothie and update his LinkedIn with inspirational quotes about disruption. I stayed put, finishing my cold coffee while the other engineers filed out, most avoiding eye contact. One of the junior devs, a good kid named Ryan Williams, who I'd trained not to crash production servers, lingered behind. He looked over with wide eyes, the kind you see on soldiers when they realize they're walking through a minefield. "Daniel," he whispered, "you okay? He's going to cut you." I crushed my styrofoam cup and tossed it in recycling with perfect accuracy. Muscle memory from years of Navy mess halls where missing the target meant kitchen duty. "Don't worry about me, Ryan. Just make sure your resume's up to date, and if you see me walking out with a box this week, don't help me carry it." Ryan nodded, understanding. Smart kid. Reminded me of myself 25 years ago, except I'd had drill sergeants teaching me to read situations instead of business school professors teaching buzzword bingo. I walked back to my desk, a corner cubicle with enough privacy to work and enough visibility to watch the office politics unfold. Logged into my private admin console, not the company one. This was my personal setup, hosted on a secure server that I pay for out of my own pocket. Old Navy habit. Always maintain your own communications channel. The freeze-out started within 48 hours, subtle as black ice on a highway. First, the calendar invites disappeared. The weekly architecture sync vanished from my Outlook. Then the strategy alignment meetings. I could see them through the glass conference room, Christopher holding court, erasing my carefully drawn system diagrams and replacing them with buzzwords like holistic synergy and cloud-native mindset. It's funny how fast you become invisible in corporate America. 8 years of 70-hour weeks, 8 years of waking up at 3 a.m. to patch critical issues so the CEO could afford his lake house and his third divorce. Suddenly I was a ghost, haunting my own workplace. People I'd had lunch with for years started avoiding eye contact in hallways. They smelled death on me, and in corporate culture, getting fired is contagious. Stand too close to the condemned man and management might decide you're part of the disease. Tuesday morning, Christopher introduced the cavalry. "Team, meet Andrew Foster. He's our product evangelist, spearheading the transition to our new stack." Andrew looked like he was maybe 25, wearing spotless white sneakers that had never touched a server room floor. Fresh MBA probably. The kind who thinks APIs are something you order at Starbucks. He walked over to my desk holding some designer coffee drink, looking like a puppy that just peed on the rug but thinks he's being helpful. "Hey Daniel, right? Christopher mentioned you're the legacy historian. I'd love to pick your brain about the old code before we deprecate it." Legacy historian. Deprecate. Corporate speak was getting more creative. "Andrew, quick question. Do you know what a load balancer actually does?" He blinked rapidly. "Well, conceptually, we use AWS for that, right? It's all serverless now." "Serverless." I turned back to my screens. "Right. Because the cloud is magic pixie dust, not actual hardware sitting in data centers that melts if you don't optimize your database queries properly." He wandered off looking confused, probably to Google load balancer and database optimization. Poor kid was walking into a minefield with a map drawn by someone who thought explosives were decorative. The technical freeze-out accelerated. Wednesday, my access to the staging environment got revoked. Generic system email. Permissions updated by admin CW. Christopher Walsh, making sure I couldn't interfere with his masterpiece. Thursday morning, they cut my VPN access. I wasn't even angry anymore. It was textbook incompetence. You don't revoke system access from the person who built the system without understanding what that person built. Like removing the foundation while people are still living in the house. I opened my personal laptop, a backup ThinkPad that had survived 3 deployments and more coffee spills than I could count, and navigated to my real command center. Patterson Tech Solutions had its own infrastructure, its own monitoring, its own everything. I'd learned from watching other companies collapse. Never put all your eggs in someone else's basket. I checked the quarterly billing status for TechFlow Systems. The licensing fee for Flowcore was due Friday at midnight. $95,000 automatically debited from their corporate account for the past 8 years. Usually handled by the old CFO, a guy named Marcus Stevens, who actually read contracts before signing them. But Marcus had been restructured last month, replaced by someone younger, hungrier, more aligned with Christopher's vision. Someone who probably saw a $95K quarterly payment to a vendor they'd never heard of and assumed it was wasteful spending from the old regime. I refreshed the banking interface. No pending transaction. I refreshed again an hour later. Still nothing. This was it. They were going to ghost the payment. In their arrogance, they thought that since I sat in a cubicle collecting what looked like a salary, actually a retainer fee structured for tax efficiency, they owned everything I'd created. They thought firing me meant they could stop paying the vendor invoice. Military logistics had taught me something crucial. Supply chains only work when everyone understands their role. Break one link through ignorance or arrogance and the whole system collapses. I pulled up my contract, digital copies backed up in 3 locations, original signed document in a fireproof safe at home. The language was crystal clear, drafted by Anthony Rodriguez after I'd told him exactly what scenarios to protect against. Clause 3.1. Payment obligations. Failure to remit licensing fees within 24 hours of due date constitutes material breach. Clause 3.2. Cure periods. There is no cure period for willful non-payment or unauthorized modification of licensed software. Section 6. Termination rights. Upon material breach, licensor may immediately suspend all usage rights and access to the licensed technology. Christopher had already violated the unauthorized modification clause by trying to patch his microservices onto my core architecture without proper API keys or permissions. Now he was about to blow the payment clause. I could have walked into his office right then. Could have said, "Hey Christopher, you're about to default on the software that runs your entire operation." Could have been the good soldier, following chain of command, preventing disaster. But then I remembered legacy thinking. Remembered the way he looked at me like I was broken furniture he couldn't wait to dump on the curb. The Navy had taught me patience. Sometimes the best strategy is letting your enemy make all the mistakes while you prepare for the inevitable moment when they realize what they've done. I let the clock tick down, watching Thursday turn to Friday, counting the hours until Christopher learned the difference between owning employees and owning intellectual property. Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. sharp, my Outlook chimed. Calendar invite from HR. Subject, quick sync with Daniel Patterson. Location, conference room. B time, 4:30 p.m. They weren't even trying to be subtle. Friday firing, classic move. End of day, end of week, give people the weekend to forget you existed. I started packing. I didn't pack much. A few photos of my kids, my lucky multi-tool from Navy days, and a half-dead succulent that somehow survived 8 years of fluorescent lighting and office air conditioning. Before shutting down my company laptop, I ran a military-grade data wipe. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I'm a professional. You don't leave fingerprints on equipment you're returning. I grabbed the manila folder I'd brought from home that morning. Inside was my licensing contract with TechFlow, highlighted in strategic places. Time to go to the principal's office. Conference Room B was a glass fishbowl near the elevators, designed so everyone could watch your execution. Perfect for corporate theater. Christopher was already there, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, probably practicing his Forbes 30 under 30 pose. Sitting at the table was Jennifer Parker from HR, a decent woman trapped in an indecent system. She had that look, the same expression Navy chaplains wore when delivering bad news to families. "Have a seat, Daniel," Jennifer said softly, like she was talking to someone on a ledge. I sat down and placed my manila folder on the table. Christopher eyed it suspiciously, probably thinking I was going to beg for my job with performance charts. Christopher jumped in before Jennifer could do her job properly. We've been evaluating team structure, and as we move toward our cloud-native future, your skill set doesn't align with our trajectory. Trajectory, I repeated, nodding slowly. Like a missile heading for a mountain. His jaw tightened. He wanted this over quick, wanted to get back to his disruption fantasies. We're terminating your employment effective immediately. Standard severance package, 2 weeks pay. We'll need your badge and laptop. Jennifer slid a stack of papers across the table. You'll also need to sign this NDA and non-disparagement agreement to receive severance. I didn't touch the papers. Looked straight at Christopher. Just to be clear, you're terminating our professional relationship completely? That's what fired means, Christopher snapped, his nice guy mask slipping. He wanted my salary budget, so he could hire 3 more Andrews. Okay. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge, slid it across the table. Then I took the company laptop out of my bag and placed it next to the badge. Clean surrender. I'm no longer an employee. Good, Christopher said, pushing off the wall. Security will escort you out. Wait. I placed my hand on the manila folder. We're done with the employment part. Now we need to discuss the vendor relationship. Christopher frowned. What vendor relationship? I opened the folder and spun the contract around so they could read it. Licensing agreement between Patterson Tech Solutions LLC and TechFlow Systems Inc., signed 2016, renewed automatically every quarter for 8 years. I don't work for you, Christopher. Never really did. My company licenses the technology that runs your procurement, logistics, and vendor payments. I was just part of the package. On-site support included in the premium service tier. Christopher laughed. Actually laughed. He picked up the contract, glanced at the cover page, tossed it back down like it was contaminated. This is old paperwork from startup days. We own everything you wrote while you were here. IP assignment is standard. Read section 4, I said, tapping the highlighted paragraph. All code, architecture, and algorithms remain sole property of the licensor, Patterson Tech Solutions. You get non-exclusive, revocable usage rights contingent on timely payment and adherence to usage guidelines. I watched his eyes scan the text, saw the exact moment the words hit his brain, but his worldview rejected them. Too absurd. In his universe, developers were employees, companies owned everything, and contracts were just formalities. This is, he sputtered, face turning red. You were on payroll. That voids this. Check. With legal, I said calmly. I was on retainer for 2 years, then W-2 for administrative convenience. Specific addendum, signed by your founder. IP rights never transferred. Patterson Tech still holds copyright registration with the Library of Congress. I stood up. Here's your situation, Christopher. You just fired the on-site support. That's fine. I was tired of the coffee anyway. But you also missed the quarterly licensing payment due tonight. That's material breach. I'm not paying you a dime, Christopher hissed. Okay. I walked to the door, paused. Jennifer, might want to print hard copies of payroll records. Friendly tip from someone who's seen systems go dark before. I looked at Christopher one last time. Section 6, Christopher. Look it up. Unauthorized use following breach results in immediate service suspension. You have 72 hours to cure the breach, but since you just fired the only person who knows the admin passwords, I shrugged. Get out! He yelled. I walked out past my old desk, past Andrew frantically typing buzzwords into PowerPoint, past the break room where I'd drunk approximately 8,000 cups of mediocre coffee, into the Phoenix heat that hit like a blast furnace. I lit my first cigarette in 6 months. It tasted like freedom. Drove straight to the good liquor store this time, not my usual dive with bulletproof glass, but the one with the wine-tasting corner and educated staff. Bought a bottle of bourbon that cost more than Andrew's sneakers. This was a celebration. Back at my apartment, one bedroom that smelled like soldering iron and old leather, I set up my real command center. My personal laptop, my admin console, my licensing server hosted in a data center that TechFlow had never heard of. The beautiful thing about paranoid system design is that it assumes the worst about human nature. Every hour, TechFlow's servers pinged mine with a heartbeat signal. Am I authorized to exist? For 8 years, my server replied, yes, proceed with operations. I navigated to the license management panel. Current status, grace period. Grace period expires 46 hours, 23 minutes. Christopher thought I was bluffing, thought the contract was theater. He didn't understand that Flowcore was built by someone who'd learned supply chain management in the military, where assuming goodwill gets people killed. The system verified licensing status against blockchain records. Immutable, unhackable, automated. I'd designed it that way because I knew that someday, some Christopher would try to take credit for my work while refusing to pay for it. I changed the system from grace period to strict enforcement mode. Queued the command, revoke license key 001, TechFlow systems. I didn't execute it yet. Wanted to give them the weekend. Let Christopher enjoy his victory lap, maybe brag to his MBA friends about trimming legacy fat from his lean operation. The system would perform its next license verification Monday morning at 8 a.m., right when weekend transaction volume hit the servers. My phone buzzed. Text from Ryan. Christopher brought champagne to the office. Says he's using your salary to upgrade the break room. I feel sick. I typed back, call in sick Monday. Trust me. I poured 3 fingers of good bourbon and opened my laptop to catch up on some classic Western movies. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people hang themselves with the rope they insist on buying. I spent Sunday doing things I hadn't done in years. Slept past 6 a.m. without an alarm. Went to a diner and ate eggs that were swimming in real butter. Didn't check email once. Didn't answer the increasingly frantic automated alerts that started pinging my backup phone around noon when TechFlow's monitoring systems began detecting anomalous licensing server connectivity issues. Sunday night, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the desert red. The bourbon bottle was half empty, my resolve was diamond hard. Monday morning, TechFlow's warehouse teams would log in to process weekend orders. The automated procurement system would attempt to purchase $2 million in raw materials. Customer service would field thousands of calls, all through my software. 7:55 a.m. Monday, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop. TechFlow's offices would be waking up. The overnight batch processes would be finishing. The system would perform its morning license verification. I hovered my cursor over the execute button. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. This was business. A landlord changing locks on tenants who trashed the property and skipped rent. Section 6, I whispered to my coffee cup. I clicked execute. On my screen, status lights cascaded from green to red. Inventory management. License revoked. Vendor API. Access denied. Payroll. Gateway. Critical failure. Customer database. Unauthorized access. The most beautiful error message I'd ever written appeared. Error 402. Payment required. Contact Patterson Tech Solutions for licensing renewal. 8:03 a.m. First alert hit my phone. The automated monitoring system I'd forgotten to unsubscribe from. SEV1. Outage. Core services unresponsive. Revenue impact critical. I imagined the scene. Warehouse scanners refusing to authenticate inventory. Truck drivers screaming because digital manifests showed blank. Customer service phones lighting up like a Christmas tree as order confirmations failed. 8:15 a.m. Phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. Daniel, this is Andrew. Everything's broken? The dashboard just says payment required and Christopher is, he's throwing things. Please call back. 8:30 a.m. Ryan texted. Dude, everything is down. Christopher literally kicked a server rack. He's screaming about cyber terrorism. I called in sick like you said. Watching from parking lot. This is insane. Kicking hardware. Universal sign of someone who thinks technology runs on magic instead of code. 9:00 a.m. The phone rang again. Caller ID, TechFlow HQ. I answered, put it on, speaker, and continued eating toast. Daniel, this is Christopher. His voice was strangled, octave higher than Friday. We have a situation. The system's completely down. We think it's a logic bomb. Did you plant malware? I don't work there anymore, Christopher, I said calmly. Return my laptop, remember? No access. Don't give me that. The error message mentions your company. What did you do? Oh, the licensing issue. I mentioned that Friday. Did you pay the quarterly invoice? We're not paying extortion. It's a contract, not extortion. Since you breached payment terms and terminated support services, the software reverted to its default state, off. Turn it back on right now or I will sue you into bankruptcy. Christopher, I said, voice dropping to that cold Navy tone I used with sailors who thought they were smarter than physics. You're currently using unauthorized intellectual property. My lawyer's already drafting cease and desist notices. Any bypass attempts violate the DMCA. That's federal prison time. Silence. Muffled voices in the background. Someone saying liability and SEC reporting requirements. Just fix it, he pleaded. All his arrogance evaporated. We're losing $7,000 a minute. Sounds like a Christopher problem. I'm unemployed, got plenty of time, but I don't do charity work for companies that fire me. What do you want? Put the CEO on the phone. He's in emergency board meetings. Then drag him out. In 15 minutes, the vendor payment system attempts to wire $3 million to suppliers. When those transfers fail because the encryption keys are locked, your supply chain officially dies. I heard running footsteps, doors slamming, panicked voices. New voice came on. Deep, authoritative, but currently shaking. Michael Stevens, CEO, the man who'd bought lake houses while I patched critical systems. Daniel, what the hell is happening? Morning, Michael, your CTO fired your landlord. Now you're locked out of the house. Michael immediately tried the corporate family speech, last refuge of executives facing investor lawsuits. Look, emotions are running high. Christopher's young, made a mistake. Come back, we'll discuss a substantial raise. I don't want a raise, Michael. That bridge didn't just burn, it was vaporized by nuclear weapons. Then what? This is blackmail. This is a vendor dispute. You're using proprietary technology you haven't paid for. 2 options. I let silence stretch until it became unbearable. Option A. Build your own system. Christopher thinks he can create cloud-native AI magic. Go ahead. Took me 8 years to build Flowcore. Maybe he can do it in 8 days. We can't. We're dead in the water without your platform. Option B. Purchase perpetual license for the source code. You own it completely, I walk away forever. Fine. How much? $1.9 million. That's highway robbery. That's 1.3% of the revenue my code generated last year, plus a consulting fee for listening to legacy thinking insults. I won't pay it. Good luck rebuilding. Oh, and Michael? Data compliance audit initiates in 90 minutes. Unlicensed systems can't legally retain customer information. GDPR, CCPA, all that. Automatic purge to avoid violations. I was lying about the purge timeline, but they didn't know that. You built it to delete everything? I built it to be compliant. Your choice how this ends. Silence. Then, I need time. 87 minutes and counting. Sending contracts to your personal email since corporate systems are experiencing difficulties. I hung up and opened my laptop to draft the transfer documents. Property Tech Solutions LLC, license transfer and emergency system restoration, $1,900,000. Next 75 minutes were Ryan's live coverage. Legal found the original contract. General counsel asked Christopher if he went to law school or clown college. Michael screaming about calling FBI. Legal explained that since TechFlow breached first, FBI would just laugh. Christopher's in the bathroom crying. Andrew quit via text message. 11:15 a.m. Phone rang. Jessica Coleman, their sharp legal counsel. Daniel, we've reviewed everything. Section 4, Section 6, IP assignment addendum. It's bulletproof. Anthony Rodriguez knows contracts. Michael's ready to sign. We need immediate restoration guarantees. Wire hits my account. I push the unlock patch within 60 seconds. Initiating wire transfer now. I refreshed my banking app. Strange feeling watching your net worth jump from comfortable retirement someday to comfortable retirement now in real time. Pending transaction, $1,900,000. Source. TechFlow Systems Inc. is confirmed, I said. Restore it. I tabbed to my terminal. Commands. Update license. Status. Perpetual. Cancel compliance audit. Execute. 2 minutes later, Ryan texted. Green lights. Systems operational. People literally crying with relief. I didn't celebrate. Felt that familiar post-mission exhaustion. It was over. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Streamline Core's executive conference room. Not the glass fishbowl for executions, but the mahogany-paneled room where actual decisions got made. Stan Rodriguez, their VP of engineering, built like a linebacker but sharp as a scalpel, leaned back in his leather chair. Daniel, we heard TechFlow paid you nearly $2 million to go away. Impressive. They paid for intellectual property they'd been using without proper licensing. Strictly business. Our vendor compliance system crashes daily. We heard tech flows worked flawlessly for years. Not worked, works. Different architecture entirely. Can you build us something similar? I smiled, pulled out a fresh folder. Can't replicate that code. I sold the IP, honor contracts. But that system's 8 years old. I've been designing next-generation architecture. Rust-based machine learning integration handles 10x the transaction volume. Timeline? 8 months with the right team. Full autonomy, no product evangelists. Compensation? $350K base plus equity. And Stan? I work for engineers who respect experience, not kids who think legacy means obsolete. Stan extended his hand. Welcome to Streamline Core, Daniel. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my home office, converted garage with a view of actual mountains instead of glass towers. Streamline Core Flow Core 2.0 launched last month, destroyed the competition. TechFlow's stock dropped 30% in the first quarter. They're trapped with systems they barely understand, maintained by terrified junior developers afraid to change a single line. Christopher eventually quit, pivoted to cryptocurrency consulting. Perfect industry for someone who sells hot air and disappears before reality sets in. Me, I check the system logs each morning like reading the newspaper. Commerce flowing through algorithms I designed, supply chains humming efficiently. I think about developers like me across the country. Invisible architects keeping civilization running while management takes credit. We're out here, we read the fine print, and sometimes we own the keys to the kingdom. Next time some 29-year-old in a vest dismisses your experience as legacy thinking, remember this. Legacy code isn't obsolete, it's battle-tested. It survived because it works. And the people who wrote it? We're not dinosaurs. We're the ones who built the world these kids think they invented.